welcome to Escaping Kasterborous, the podcast where we rewatch, reminisce, and review everything Doctor Who from 2005 to present. My name is Rich, and I'm joined by someone who will definitely not be being sucked dry when she's old and wrinkly. It's Amy.
Aww.
I thought of that one on the spot. I am very proud of myself.
That's vile.
Are you proud of me?
No, because it's
okay.
Vile.
But was this episode vile? That is what we're going to be answering today on Escaping Kasterborous, episode number 12, actually.
12.
Episode number 12 of our reboot. Technically 13, because previously
Christmas
was episode
specials.
0. No, previously was episode
yeah.
0. I mean, is
That's
it
the one.
of our second run of EK, not like
I see.
episode 12. This is the 6th episode of Series 3. Yes, we're talking about the Lazarus experiment broadcast on the 5th of May, 2007. We had just turned 12, Amy.
Wow. We're really going for it, haven't we?
Yeah.
12
It's
years
interesting
old was a
that
time.
we were 12 years old when this aired, and now we're both 26.
I don't wish I could be 12 again, though.
No, I don't either. That sucks.
Not 12.
Screw being young.
I think the best age is 21, personally.
I reminisce back to being like young
Early
and reckless and at
20s.
uni. It was great fun. And now we're, old and
I'm
losing
not
our
old.
hair.
No, you're losing your
I'm
hair.
losing
Don't
my
bring
hair.
me into that. I'm not losing my hair. My hair's great.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, but you've been losing your hair since you were like 12.
Shh. That's
So,
Oh wow, so it was this episode's fault, the reason I'm going bald.
yeah.
Is that what
Lazarus
okay.
sucked all the youth out of you and
God damn it, Mark, stop sucking me dry.
made you lose your hair.
Welcome, folks, to the Lazarus experiment. Welcome back to Escaping Kasterborous, and as per with our usual opening of our recordings, we're going to open with apologies for it being so long. It has been a pretty long
over a
while
month.
since our last episode. I'm going to
Over a
double check
month.
when our last episode was because I can't actually remember.
I really do feel like it was before Christmas.
It wasn't before Christmas, I can tell you that much.
Was it New Year?
It was on January the 8th.
Oh, okay, so it was the week after New Year.
It was the week after New Year.
Oops,
and-
nearly 2 months.
Yeah, nearly 2 months. Please accept our apologies. And
For
as
context.
I always say this anyway, and I really appreciate it that everyone who listens to this podcast knows that it's a bit spotty. It's a bit here and there. Everyone understands and thankfully appreciates that. We don't get people tweeting us saying, where's your next episode? Rah, 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 rah. And, we really do appreciate that. So
Not
thank
have
you.
the schedules for regular recording.
Yeah, we do a lot of stuff. And since January the 8th, we have been doing a lot of stuff. I went to Paris and helped produce Le Mans Virtual. That was like 15th and 16th of January, I believe.
You left on the 12th, actually.
I left on the 12th, yes. And then since then it's just been really, really busy. I've been trying to get back onto YouTube stuff, which I am doing. But yeah, it's been really busy. And Amy,
I've got a new job again,
Yep.
which I feel like I say a lot on this podcast. It's like, oh, I got a new job. But
this is nothing reflective of you. This is reflective of the places you've ended up working.
yeah, it's not. I promise, I'm not just like an awful employee that gets sacked I've actually never been sacked, so that's really helpful. But no, it just happened to be that when we moved back to Northampton, I got a job that only worked out for like a month because it was awful. So then I went and worked for one of my old bosses, where I was there for eight months, something like that.
Was it really
7
that
or
long?
8 months. Yeah, I worked there from the start of May-ish until
Right.
when did I leave? Christmas Eve.
Christmas, yeah.
So yeah, about 8 months. Maths, 7 months. I don't know what that maths is. And then I left there on Christmas Eve, and now I work for the NHS. And the reason I left my last job was purely because it was running me into the ground. Didn't really feel like it was doing me any favours. I was basically just a delivery driver, wasn't really exercising my full potential.
And you were basically running the place at points, which was very much not fair on you. So
Yeah, exactly.
This is obviously this is nothing against Amy, and I can confirm that she is wonderful in everything she does. It's
You're
just
a
that
bit biased, but
I mean, I'm not. I'll tell you how it is.
Yeah, I
but
know.
like if it just unfortunately that since we moved here, or we could start EK again after I left What Culture, which funnily enough was a year ago as of yesterday.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Just nothing seemingly worked out for you. It's been,
Unfortunately.
Thankfully, I've been all right. I've nearly been at my new job for almost a year, which has been mad, and it's been brilliant, and I've loved every second of it. But hopefully things are really going to sort of properly settle now.
I mean, I'm thinking I do enjoy this job. Well, I've only been there a month, and people's favourite question to ask me is, are you still enjoying it? As if I shouldn't be.
As if you should turn around and be like, no, I hate it already.
Literally. People were asking me that within the first 3 days of my job. I was like, dude, this is not a good standard.
It's just standard job small talk, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, are you enjoying it? Like, what else do you say? Like, what else do you reply with, and what else do you say to a new starter? Like, are you having a good time? You don't just go and open the conversation with like, do you like Doctor Who?
I mean, I'm not being funny. But when people say, are you still enjoying it when you've only been there 3 days, it was kind of like, should I not be still enjoying it? Are you
expecting me to say something different?
And also, what do you expect me to say? I'm hardly going to turn around and go, actually, no, I'm just here for the money, really, because the money's not even like...
I mean, you see that a lot of, like, you go to a job interview and they say, why would you like this job? And you say, well, I need to keep a roof over my head. Like, I need money to survive. How else am I going to buy Lego?
Capitalism. So that obviously being that was a hell of a lot of a change for me to take on, because I've always worked as a barista for literally the last 10 years of my life. The only jobs I've had have been in coffee shops. So minus 2, but we won't talk about those 2. And for the sort of difference between being a barista to suddenly working in the NHS and being in a totally different style job, I'm not a doctor or anything, let's just get that clear. I basically file paperwork and handle people's patient information and stuff like that, so yeah, I'm admin based, but it's good. Like, I think it's a good change that I needed, and absolutely. I get to work with a couple of my friends who also work there, and the people that I work with on my team are really great, and yeah, so it's...
And you get your weekends back.
Exactly, and that was the other thing I was going to say. I've gone from shift work to a Monday to Friday, 8 till 4, 9 till 5, 10 till 6, whatever shift I end up doing. But it has meant that I'm not struggling to adapt, but it's very different.
It is a change. Which is honestly why...
Yeah.
It's why we've been so spotty, because you've been getting used to a new schedule. We've been really busy at Traction. I mean, if you are keeping on top of games, like, we've got loads of stuff happening at the minute. We've hit our first, or at least the first big batch of games releasing in the new year. So we've had loads and loads of stuff that we've been having to keep on top of. Assetto Corsa Competizione, Gran Turismo 7, Grid Legends, what else? Monster Energy Supercross 5, we've got Chocobo GP coming out. So it's like we are like suddenly we're stacked with loads of stuff to do. So, you know, we've both been very busy, and like we've said, this change in schedule has meant that we've had to work out how our weeks are structured from there, because, you know, I'm still streaming as much as I can. I'm trying to get YouTube underway. I'm annoyed at myself that my YouTube has been the one thing that's kind of dropped, because I never expected it to. I never planned it to be, but it's been the thing that I've struggled to get back up and going again. But don't worry, there is a video coming soon, and obviously EK gets uploaded, which is great. It's easy content for me to put on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help that we used to record on a Wednesday night, but now it's kind of... It doesn't really fit into our schedule anymore to do a Wednesday evening, because
but we're probably moving it back to the weekends.
Yeah, well, we can now that I have weekends off.
I mean, it's Sunday today as we're recording this, so that's more than likely where it's going to go back to.
Yeah, the last few weekends since I've started my job a month ago have literally been so full on, because obviously the first few weekends you ever have off in your life, which I've literally not had any weekends off for 10 years that haven't been holiday bookings. Obviously I was going to be busy, because people were like, oh, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this.
Yeah.
And
I think
as much as I love it.
This weekend coming is the first one we've got that is actually not got anything booked.
Yeah.
And for good reason. I've got Gran Turismo 7 from Friday.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be sat in front of my PlayStation all weekend. So that's where we've been, and I know that you joked about this with me earlier that like we're gonna open this podcast again saying sorry.
I mean, for people who are binging this podcast in the background who come across it in maybe like a year's time and they're like, why do they open so many episodes with "I'm sorry"?
But we just we don't want to take it for granted. We do really appreciate that you guys are patient, and we love that the audience we have has managed to stick even with being so inconsistent. Because obviously with working in YouTube, I have been asked what's the best thing to do when you're trying to do YouTube, and it's like consistency.
It is consistency.
And yet I'm literally the worst at consistency, as you can see from my own YouTube channel and this podcast. I mean, the beauty of doing the episode reviews for Doctor Who is that it was weekly, and it was like I can't really not do
shy
it.
away from that.
Whereas now that I'm having to just drum up my own content, which I've got loads of ideas, I just need to actually make them. It's not been
just
as
finding the time.
I've not been
it?
stuck to it too much. It's not even necessarily finding the time. It's sometimes finding the energy, because you're working a full-time job, and then trying to stream twice a week at least, and then planning a wedding, which we are doing. And all that, and just everything else that life throws at you, trying to find the time to do everything in one go is it's difficult.
Which especially when like you leave the house at 8 o'clock and you don't get back to the house till 6 p.m. It's kind of takes it out.
So like exactly. And I try not to wear myself out too much. And if there's anything I'm going to do that's going to wear me out, like if I ever willingly wear myself out, it'll be for my job, because at the end of the day, that's what pays the bills. So
wow. I mean,
if I have to stay late and work late, which I did the week just gone, then I'll do it. So yeah, as you guys know, things always have to give way, and things like EK and YouTube are always going to be for no reason apart from logistics and importance in terms of financial reasons.
Yeah, I was going to say the fact that
it's never down to the fact we don't want to do it, because we do want to do it. We always want to do it, but
I'm always going like, hey, should we do the podcast this week? And then it gets to like the day we're supposed to do it, and something comes up, and we're like, oh.
Yeah, genuinely. I mean, if we were recording on a Wednesday this week coming, we literally wouldn't be able to, because I'm working late again. So it's like, yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, that's where we've been, and I hope you folks appreciate the fact that we always like to be clear on what's going on when things don't go to plan, because I've come from somewhere that decides to keep everything as quiet as possible when stuff changes, and from seeing it from the business side and looking at the audience reaction to it, it's not the best idea. So we're always going to try and be a lot more clear when we say it's going to be a while until the next one. But hopefully now we're back into a bit of more, we've settled into a new schedule now, or at least Amy's settled into a new schedule. Hopefully we can stick to this a bit more so. And we are making our way through series 3, but now we're on the Lazarus experiment. 6th of May,
so this
5th
is
of
the
May.
6th episode of it.
6th episode, 5th of May.
So how many have we got left?
2007. Another 7 episodes, because next week is 42. Which is the episode you keep forgetting exists.
Yeah.
But you also
I don't forget it exists.
You mix it
I
up
confuse it with the Satan Pit and what's it from series 2. Yeah.
Because aesthetically they are very, very similar. Obviously we'll cover that once we get to it next week, but they are very similar.
You've got the red glow, you've got the kind of steel ship looking thing. You've literally got tunnels that people are having to escape through. It's basically the same episode,
grimy industrial,
just with a different big bad of the week, isn't it?
Yeah, and also the first big bad from Chris Chibnall. That's next week. That's next time. That's gonna be fun.
I feel like maybe I will look at it slightly differently now.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched that one since like we first watched it, probably, or the last time we did a watch through together, like in full, which would have been donkeys ago.
How long ago?
So we, but anyway, let's talk about Lazarus experiment. That's why we're here.
Oh yeah.
So we've got Mr. Lazarus himself, Mr. Mark Gatiss, his first appearance in Doctor Who. Obviously, he wrote The Unquiet Dead in series 1. But this is the first time he's appeared in the show as an actor, and I think he's one of the first people to have appeared in the show and written for it, at least in the new era. So, and he's a mad scientist. He makes a machine, makes himself young again, and wreaks havoc as a creature straight out of a Resident Evil game on the PS2.
Yeah, it was a bit janky.
So, I mean, you know what? Let's talk about Lazarus to kick things off. And the first thing I need to say, and this is a full... Like, this is a this is more of an appreciation for the prosthetics they used, but genuinely, when I watched this episode, and in certain shots, certain points when he's lit in a certain way, the prosthetics, the aged prosthetics on Mark Gatiss, they genuinely fooled me when I was young. I 100% thought it was a different actor. I thought the way he performed it, the way he sounds, and the way he looks, at least, like I said, in certain shots, I was fully fooled that it was somebody else.
I mean, I think when you get older and you obviously know what prosthetics are and you can sort of see through it a little bit, you can see his eyes, and obviously eyes are a dead giveaway when it comes to prosthetics, because I think there's a point in this series when we see David in older prosthetics.
Twice, actually.
And his eyes are so apparent that it's still him.
They're young. Yeah.
But I think with Mark Gatiss, the way that they did his was they gave him such sunken eyes that it was almost hard to see them a little bit at times.
Yeah.
So I can sort of see why it would be a bit more believable.
Which is why when there's a shot upstairs when he takes that woman upstairs,
the older woman,
Lady Thor, takes her upstairs and flirts with her, gives her a bit of a snog. There's a point when he's like looking almost directly down the camera, and he's been lit in such a way it almost like really accentuates the fact there's a face beneath the face, and that's where it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously that's fully Mark Gatiss, we know this now, but like back, usually it's the shots of him stood in front of the machine when he's doing his little speech. I'm like, genuinely, that looked like someone else.
Yeah.
So I was fully fooled by it, and as much as I know that now, I'm still looking at it, watching it again today, and thinking that is probably one of the most convincing aged prosthetics I've seen in Doctor Who. And this is in series 3.
Yeah.
So, they did very well with that. But on the flip side, sorry.
No, it's all right. I was going to say, I think the only part of me that looks at it slightly outside of reality is that I look at it and think, do old people's skin really look that sunken? Like, because his was quite deeply like inset when but I think it was purposely done to kind of try and illustrate the huge difference between him being old to him being young again and all that sort of stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you see the things of him as the older Lazarus stood next to Lady Thor, who is obviously played by an older woman, and you can see how it's almost like you look at their neck, when old people get a slaggy neck,
the turkey gobble, and
it's like and it's like you see how much hers is there, and you see how much Mark's is there, and it's like, yeah, yours is a lot more exaggerated. If this were theatre, he was on a stage, perfect,
it'd be perfect.
But for close-ups on screen, it's like, yeah, you've taken it just that edge too far. But again, it's Doctor Who. It's not one of those things you really criticise. But then I can use the segue now. But on the flip side, when it comes to the creature Lazarus, the conceptually, I love the idea of there being a potential evolutionary direction that humanity could have gone in, and this was potentially one of them. But it didn't go that way. It went to where we are now, but somehow he unlocked it and brought back like a relic of potential humanity. I find that really interesting.
I do find it really interesting. It's a cool concept. The only thing that I find a bit sort of janky and unbelievable about the whole thing is the sheer kind of size and scope of what he ended up turning into, and it kind of feels like, I get it that it's maybe supposed to be kind of heralding back to the dinosaurs and that kind of thing, but like humans didn't evolve from dinosaurs, so I don't think humans have ever really had an evolution that would be rejected in that kind of form, have we? Like, this is a bit interesting. Nah, not that.
It's never. It may have been more of a thing that they could have written in a line for David that said, this was, this could have been 2 million years after the point when humanity took a direction to where they are now. So like maybe like beyond where we are, for example. Obviously, I don't know how they could have worked that in without it feeling too much like exposition, but I do see what you mean. They could have made it a bit of a they could have made him a little bit closer to human size, like just a bit bigger, but not like ridiculously big.
Yeah, he just basically becomes like almost like you can't believe that he's supposed to be human anymore. I think if it had been a kind of human form that was slightly more dangerous, then I feel like maybe it would have been, not that it's the suspension of disbelief, and I say that phrase a lot on this podcast, but it's basically what do you choose to pick holes in? Are you just going to give yourself the benefit of the doubt and believe that this is a thing? 90% of the time with Doctor Who, you have to kind of go, yeah, we're just going to ignore the fact that this wouldn't actually be the case and just let it be. So I get it, but I do think that this episode had a very good balance of tension and action compared to, because it's only like a 1 episode story. But what Russell T Davies is actually, who wrote this episode? Because it wasn't Russell T Davies, was it?
No, it was Stephen Greenhorn.
Stephen Greenhorn. One thing I did want to point out with Stephen's writing is the fact that he very cleverly balanced out the sort of exposition-y side of things and the action side of things, but also in those moments when the Doctor is speaking to Lazarus and sort of saying, like, you know, I'm older than you think and all this kind of stuff, especially that scene in the church, you really, really feel like Stephen got the... oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? I always seem to forget words when we're recording.
Standard procedure.
He basically really understands the Doctor's backstory
Rhythm.
and his, like, the way he would feel in the situation that Lazarus is in, and the dialogue between the two of them, I think, was absolutely spot on. Like, you really couldn't have got that depth of emotion from anybody else except the Doctor. And so I think that was done really, really well, to be honest, because the dialogue is something that in these earlier series really, really is key to the progression of a lot of the stories.
But one of the things that whenever you talk about the Lazarus experiment, people always talk about the monster and the CGI of it. And it's like, yeah, the CGI is not great. It's not like completely dreadful, but the main thing that people point out is the face. Mm-hmm. The fact that they took an image of Mark Gatiss's face and added it to the texture they put on this model. And it's obviously to give it as much as you get a heavily implied transformation sequence. Obviously it's not overly done. It's not like The Empty Child or Tooth and Claw or Night Terrors during Matt Smith's era where you see like a full-on transformation sequence happen. Usually for something like this, I guess like kind of like Tooth and Claw, they probably blew all the budget on making a werewolf, a full werewolf transformation. Maybe for this one they thought, maybe we can't really stretch to that, and also logistically, like that kind of transformation, it's quite drastic between the two. So managing to choreograph something like that would have been quite difficult for them. But they wanted to make have there be something that means you can very much relate to it being Lazarus, and obviously with that was having his face on it, even though it doesn't really look like Mark Gatiss, but it's a face.
No, I mean,
it's meant to say, look, here's the essence of humanity that's left there, kind of, sort of, not really, because he's got a weird predator mouth.
I feel like it almost would have been better had they just negated his face entirely and like just put a monster face on it, but not his face, because literally no other part of the body that you see on this monster is human in any shape or form. So why did the face specifically have to be the one thing that the evolution apparently, oh no, the face is good, we'll keep the face. Like
I think that was added for the sake of having there be some kind of referential tangent between the two characters, but again, everything else surrounding it very much implies this is Lazarus. This isn't going to be something else.
I mean,
unless
the fact
they wanted
that
to not add a face and add a twist that there's two of them.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I mean,
that's a whole narrative thing to discuss another time.
The fact that the Doctor literally refers to him as Lazarus, I think, would have given it away enough.
Well, exactly. Like I said, the transformation sequences, pseudo transformation sequences, very much play up to that.
Mm-hmm. And I also love the fact that they do the stereotypical Doctor Who early noughties monster thing. When it's looking through the eyes of the monster, it's a different colour screen. Ooh,
and it's all
with a bit of motion
stuff.
blur. Ooh.
Yeah, classic.
Like, I'm the monster now.
For the sake of not making, like, trying to structure this podcast a bit better, because the thing about these are we just wing it, basically. And normally I answer questions right at the end, but having them on my screen right now means I can drop them in as and when relevant to what we're talking about. So Aaron has asked, how does Lazarus rank amongst Doctor Who's CGI monsters so far? Do you think he could have been done practically? He's surprisingly Resident Evil-esque for family TV on reflection. So yeah, it is very Resident Evil. I'm trying to think of the CGI monsters we've had so far
because obviously we've
specifically.
had the werewolf, haven't we?
Werewolf is fully CGI.
We've had the Krillitane. No.
Krillitane was CGI.
Yeah.
We had technically the Slitheen running was CGI.
Are they called the Krillitane, or was it Krillitane oil?
Krillitane. They are called Krillitanes.
That's what they are called.
That was another one. I just had a tip of my tongue and it's left me all of a sudden. The Reapers from Father's Day. They were fully CGI. There's probably more that I'm trying to think of.
I've got to be honest. I think out of most of the examples we've just given, this one's the worst. Like, in terms of CGI.
Yeah, I would say...
I think it's because they tried to do it on a much bigger scale. So, he's a big monster. So, the fact that they're trying to fill rooms with him and, like, put into perspective his size and his stature, and the fact that they added the weird face, which maybe kind of wasn't necessary, I think that makes him look much more out of place than, say, the other ones. Like the werewolf, I feel, was still more...
the werewolf is probably the best, because in terms of just generally it's 3D model and having to do all the hair stuff. Like, I remember watching the Doctor Who Confidential about modelling and animating that werewolf. That would have been very, very difficult. And for Series 2... when, as much as obviously Series 1 was successful enough to justify a Series 2 and the budget would have increased, like, it was really, really good for TV CGI at the time. The werewolf probably takes it. Mm-hmm. As for the question about doing it practically, again, if they'd have made... They could have still gone for that very Resident Evil, like the sort of the grey of the creature, the sort of exposed rib cage. Like, they could have played up to that, but made it physical, done a practical costume. It would have been restrictive in terms of how he could have moved, because obviously the way that the Lazarus creature moves in this episode, it's very, very active. And it was the main reason why the Slitheen in Series 1, whenever they were running, it was always CGI, because those costumes, you could not run in them. Until later on in, like, the Sarah Jane Adventures, when they made the costumes a lot better and the actors could run in them. So it would have changed up the whole dynamic if they'd have done it practically. Would it have been more convincing? Yes.
But at the same time, like I said, I don't feel like I watched this episode and think that it ruins it per se.
No, not at all.
So I think it CGI was probably the best way to go. I just think there were small decisions that could have been made that probably would have made it better, like the face, and maybe trying not to add so many details onto his body, because I feel like his monster body was very, very, like, intricately designed. Yeah. And he had parts that you probably don't even see for more than, like, 2 seconds in a shot that have probably had far too much detail added to them. So I don't know whether maybe adding less detail would have meant that the CGI quality could have been slightly better. But you can also kind of tell that they spent all of the money on the monster for the CGI for this episode, because there's that shot of, is it Tish? Trish?
Tish.
What's Tish? There's a scene of Tish and Lazarus on the roof, and the motion tracking, her back arm that's furthest away from the camera is, like, the edge of it is so, like, wibbly and, like, cut into, where the green screen clearly wasn't, like,
and you
tracked
can see
properly.
That they're not properly tracked to the ground, because they're slightly sliding around on the position they are, because obviously they shot this in Cardiff because it's where Doctor Who was shot, and they've obviously mapped on a London skyline to this rooftop set or whatever they had. And it's a bit rough. Another thing in terms of the production, and we don't know whether this is the Blu-ray we're watching, because we're watching the newest Blu-ray steelbooks of Doctor Who Series 1 to whatever. They're up to Series 8 now.
Yeah.
And I need my Series 9 one. Come on, BBC. get it sorted. And this episode was horrifically overexposed. And I don't have an original DVD to check with. I might check the BBC iPlayer versions because I think they're just the bog standard like original versions because they're not the HD ones. I'll have to have a look, but like there were points when, especially in the main like test chamber, where the Lazarus chamber was like pure white. It was fully overexposed.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think it was an aesthetic choice. I think that was more a case of either they fluffed up the shooting or the color grading is a bit weird because as we've discussed, there are points when they change up their whole production method for the sake of the episode they're shooting. So as an example, last series we talked about The Idiot's Lantern and basically everything is shot on a Dutch angle, like the whole thing, apart from right at the end when the wire is vanquished and everything goes back level again. Like, it's something I've loved about those episodes, but we don't think that was a deliberate production decision, but I need to check. But everything was overexposed, which was weird.
Because I don't think it would have been a production decision to overexpose everything, because what would be the point? Like, I understand if you want to overexpose the actual chamber, because that kind of proves that something's going on in there, but that would only be one shot, whereas everything else was pure. Like, some shots were normal exposure and some shots were horrendously overexposed. I think it could be a Blu-ray, like, sort of
I think it is because as we've said
issue.
before, we have issues with the audio, where the audio mix is really bad as well. But you know, we're working our way through it. So yeah, we'll get there eventually.
I think we just need to watch more with subtitles from now on.
It's not been that bad. It wasn't as bad as Series 13.
No, but I don't know. There was some
dreadful.
There were some points in this episode when I couldn't hear what Martha was saying, like in the slightest.
Oh man!
But it's only because I watched it so often.
Yeah. So Izzy asks about what our opinion is on the premise of the episode, and so she says that the execution, in her opinion, wasn't good, but I think the premise could have been better. I think, and I think we said the premise, the idea, the concept is. The thing is, it's not pushing the boat out all that much. I mean, Russell T Davies said to the writer, we just. Big Marvel Comics, big silly evil scientist does something and stuff goes wrong. That's basically all it is. And then it's sort of like a base under siege story.
Yeah.
Because it's just set within, well, apart from when it goes to the cathedral, but it's just set in one building.
I quite like it, I think the premise is actually a good premise because it's something that isn't really explored very often. I think the idea of somebody wanting to defeat death is something that's usually explored in the terms of like you said, like Marvel villains trying to just kind of overcome the universe and take control and stuff like that. But no one's ever really tried to boil death down to the fact that human bodies just can't handle aging. And I think that's a really cool concept to explore. I do think that, maybe the execution could have been slightly better in some ways, but at the same time, I think that the conversations that happen in between the Doctor and Lazarus during the episode really hit home for why this episode is as good as it is. I mean, I'm not saying it's the best episode by any stretch of the imagination, but it's in my opinion, good episode. I don't think it's great, but I think it's good. You get a lot of hidden... Well, not quite so hidden anymore, but you get a lot of Mr. Saxon mentions. But
lots of just general references. I mean, obviously there's a Bond reference in it.
There's an Eliot reference.
Oh, what, sorry?
Is it T.S. Eliot, the
T.S.
poet?
Eliot, yeah.
Or is that the guy who wrote...
And then...
It is T.S. Eliot, isn't it?
Possum's Book of Practical Cats, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Carry on.
And, of course, the big reference that has been asked by Edward on Twitter about the reverse the polarity reference.
Oh, yeah.
And how it's taken them 2.5 series to actually do that for Doctor Who. Like, how did it take them this long to do that is what Edward asks. And
who was it that used to make that reference? That used to say that all the time. It was.
The third Doctor, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. So they've taken this long to do it. And again, this will come down to not necessarily bombarding the audience with Doctor Who stuff that they don't necessarily know. Like Series 5, when Matt Smith took over and so did Big Moff, that really felt like the point where they could start to play with Doctor Who. It had been re-solidified again in like British TV consciousness, and they could start playing up to old things again. Hence why we saw so many enemies come back and stuff during the Moffat era. Whereas here they're still introducing things, which is probably why they didn't do a reference to reverse the polarity of the neutron flow straight away. I mean, at the end of the day, they can just keep teasing these things. Like, it's what they do on TV.
But no, I like it. I think it's because when he said it, I was like, oh, that's a reference.
Yeah.
Whereas when we were kids, we obviously wouldn't have understood that at all. But I think it's...
We just thought he was saying, you know, sciencey gobbledygook, which he is, but obviously that's term specifically.
Yeah, but I think it's quite funny that in this instance he actually was trying to reverse the polarity of something, which...
Arguably, yes. Yeah.
Because he was just trying to make it do it in reverse, wasn't he? So I think, it's quite... I like the fact that they threw it in just kind of off the cuff, and the fact that he's like, normally don't take me that long, but must be our practice.
Well, he says, you know, it's been a while since I've done that. And speaking of that specific scene when he reverses the polarity of the machine and nukes Lazarus, and there he is, stark bollock naked, laid on the floor, and he's supposedly dead, but he escapes again. After the scene in the church, in the cathedral with the Doctor playing the organ and so on and so forth, that always reminds me of Spider-Man 3.
Why?
What's he called? The guy who plays Venom. Topher Grace is the actor's name, but Eddie Brock.
Oh.
When he's like when Spider-Man's on the cathedral when he's got the black suit on. I don't know how well you remember Spider-Man 3. And the bell starts ringing and the symbiote is trying to, like, it's getting all detaching and stuff, and there's Eddie Brock in the church, like, praying for a way for him to kill Peter Parker, and the symbiote falls down the inside of the church and lands on him. It just, for some reason, because it's like transformations, loud sounds, and alien stuff, even though technically this is one of those rare times where the only alien in play is the Doctor. It just reminds me of Spider-Man 3. But then after Lazarus is actually defeated and he falls through the tower and he hits the deck, because the Doctor manages to basically turn a giant organ into the same kind of machine. Because once he understands the science of it, then it's like, technically,
I mean, it helps that he's got a sonic screwdriver.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
But
that's the only way he can do it. But he talks about sound waves. Like, that's always present throughout the course of this episode. It's always talking about sound waves and resonance and so on. So it's like, it feels, at least in the Doctor Who space, justifiable enough. Once Lazarus has died, he does the thing where it closes his eyes and it does like a cut and it cuts back and he's old again. Mm-hmm. And that threw you off a bit.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I'm not being funny, but if you die, your body stops, does it not? Like, is that...
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't... I feel like if you're dead, your DNA is hardly going to continue to mutate and do anything. So the fact that the Doctor reversed it, I think if they'd have really wanted to show that in terms of, I get why they did it, because obviously they didn't have the prosthetics for a full old man body. Like, you can't have that shot from above of the naked guy on the floor dead with full prosthetics. But I feel like maybe they could have like balanced that shot out a bit better, where he falls to the floor, and instead of having a shot of him dead from above, you see the monster die on the floor, or like you see like the monster sort of crash to the floor, and then when the Doctor goes and sees him, maybe he's like old again or something. I don't know. I just feel we didn't need to see him old again to understand he was dead. Like, we already got that. Maybe you could have just had him there dead.
You see, I think you are wrong and you're silly. And you're a fake Doctor Who fan,
oh my God.
I get it. They definitely could have made that almost poignant moment of him becoming old again to really signify it being the end. They could have maybe made it a little bit smoother, as you say. It could have transitioned it from being the monster crashing down and then maybe like, you know, from behind the Doctor, and then it's sort of the camera moves and it's like, oh look, he's old again now. He's not the young Lazarus anymore. But the fact that they made him old again, because obviously we've already seen him quote unquote die once already, and he remained young as he was, covered over and taken in the ambulance. Like, he was young. Now he's old again. So it's that. And obviously using the organ, the doctor supposedly like reversed what happened to him, hence why he died and also the fall. And it was there. He became old again to fully signify, yep, he is dead. He's not going to come back again. That's fully closing the book. Because if they'd have left him young and supposedly dead, even though he was laid there with his eyes open, like, it would always open up that potential door where Doctor Who content creators and article writers and YouTubers will always be asking the question, like whenever they talk about like unanswered questions from Doctor Who, did Lazarus really die?
Yeah.
If he remained young, that would always leave that door open. And I think it was fully the right decision to be like, no, he is dead. He is not coming back. End of story.
But
So
then also...
that's why I'd say is why they made him old again. But I do agree they could have made that more poignant moment, that important thing, just a little bit more robust in its execution and not so jarring.
I think maybe what they should have done was had him attacking Martha and Tish in the bell tower, and then as the Doctor's playing the organ, they do another kind of off-screen transformation back to his like younger self to prove that the monster is like reversing, and then as he falls they could have done the CGI of an old man falling, and then instead of having the shot from above they should have just had the Doctor go up to him and he's old on the floor again and then closes his eyes. Like, I think that would have worked better for the general transition, because I just feel like it was so jarring to be like, young man on the floor closes up backward, he's old again.
I think the reason why they probably couldn't have done that is A, because of, again, the logistics of doing a transformation sequence to a creature that big to a human that small would have been a bit interesting and would probably cost a lot. But also, they can just show a big, weird scorpion creature hit the deck from the top of a tower. A human man? Probably not. Because I don't think the Doctor's going to go over to a man still in one piece. He'll go down to see a splattered old bloke with his brain halfway across the floor. Which is probably why they couldn't do it like that. I do see what you mean, though. But yeah, I think obviously when you're doing stuff like Doctor Who that is for a family audience, you have a very, very narrow line to cross, or a tightrope to walk. And it's like, there are points when I really do wish they push that a lot further than they do. Hence why there are episodes like The Empty Child, like Blink, like Night Terrors that just, they stick with you because they really push that boundary. And I would argue that yes, this episode is meant to be a little bit more not so much slapstick, but it's meant, as you say, the suspension of disbelief. You've just got to run with it.
Yeah.
And it's like the Resident Evil references that I've said, that Aaron said. These are things that you can genuinely take into play and think, yeah, okay, I can genuinely see that. Mm-hmm. But when there are the shots of the Doctor and Lazarus chasing each other through the building, when there's the shot of him coming down the corridor and the camera flips upside down, I think that's honestly one of the best CGI chase shots they've done in Doctor Who. Not necessarily down to like how the creature looks, but just down to like the composition. It's just so interesting that they made it do that. Yeah. They could have just done loads of like static plates and they just animated the guy running like they did with the Slitheen. It was just static camera, Slitheen run past, cut away from it. They decided to do something more interesting with it, and I have a lot of respect for that episode for doing that, even though the creature and the story, it's all a bit silly. But they took it seriously enough. And something I mentioned to Amy when we were watching this, there's one shot once the Doctor says, everyone, you need to run, and Lazarus turns up and everyone starts running, there's a shot of the Lazarus logo. It almost looks like reverse Gallifreyan, like inverted Gallifreyan, like on the wall, and you've got the silhouette of people running in front of it. They put it on the Next Time trailer for it as well, and it's like one of my favourite shots in all of Doctor Who. I don't know why, it's just it's so cool.
Is it bad that scene where he's in the hallway and the camera starts turning round reminds me just of High School Musical 3? Where
so instead of Troy singing about his emotions, there's just a giant scorpion guy trying to kill a bloke.
It's true, though.
Matt, right, we have to
except
do some
for the fact that High
and
School
After
Musical
Effects.
3 was fully physical. Like, they literally built a hallway set that obviously had like a one of those like illusion ends that ended on a flat wall but looked like it kept going. But they literally built a 3 full box of a hallway and made Zac Efron like dance round this rotating. Great.
I'm gonna move on before we turn this into a High School Musical 3 podcast because
sorry.
Lord knows we'll talk about it. Jay has asked, while we're just on the topic of big old Mark, out of all the Mark Gatiss Doctor Who roles, which is our favourite and why? So we are going to be jumping forwards a little bit in time to when Mark Gatiss reappears. Now,
I was going to say, you're going to have to remind me what his other roles are. Off the top of my head,
I don't think he's appeared in many more substantial positions or roles in Doctor Who as the Lazarus Experiment. I might be wrong, but I need to double triple
I mean, once you've
check.
kind of been Lazarus, how do you get away from being Lazarus? Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so he was Professor Lazarus. Mm-hmm. He was the voice of one of the pilots in Victory of the Daleks, which was the first Matt Smith Dalek era story with the progenitor and the Spitfires going up into space. He was Gantok. Now, you're not going to know what that is. You'll barely notice that.
No.
Now, this role was, I think, Mark getting the chance to do some proper prosthetics, like some more, not like old man prosthetics, but weird prosthetics. Do you remember during, I think it's series 6, where the Doctor goes and plays like electrified chess with a character in it. It's like a build up to it, like a big like montagey thing of him trying to find information and stuff like that. And he plays electrified chess in a big arena with somebody, and he's wearing one of the eye patches that the woman uses against the silence. Basically, that's Mark Gatiss in like loads of prosthetics.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he played the captain in Twice Upon a Time.
Twice Upon Time. Not Twice Upon a Time. Is it?
No, Twice Upon a Time was Series 10's... That was Capaldi's final episode.
Oh, I'm thinking of Once Upon Time.
Upon Time from Series 13, yeah. So there is 4 main roles in Doctor Who.
So to put it like this, I don't remember anything from Capaldi, so no, I'm not going to remember that.
Basically, in terms of like Doctor Who lore, the captain is arguably his most important, but we're not going to spoil that.
Okay.
As much as it was very much predicted, and it was like, yep, it's the case. It's exactly what you thought it was.
Okay. I don't remember it, so okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that one. But Lazarus, his performance, I loved. And another reason why he was so convincing as the older Lazarus is just the way he spoke, the way he was an old bloke always chewing something, it seemed. Yeah. Like, that was why I was always so convinced that the other guy, the older Lazarus, wasn't Gatiss in prosthetics, because he performed it so well. And then that weird, creepy womanizer character, basically mirroring Barney Stinson in How I Met Your Mother, like 2 gay blokes playing womanizers, which is always an interesting juxtaposition. Like we have.
Oh wait, is Mark Gatiss gay?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Did you not know that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, like I think his performance in this is really good. Obviously, you get the weird like, oh look, I'm transforming.
Yeah, but then how do you do a transformation like
without actually showing a transformation?
Without being like,
well,
you just can't. It's not possible.
And then, like I said, the other 2 roles, Danny Boy and Gantok, whatever it is, like that's not necessarily a big role.
What was the original question?
Which of his roles is the best?
Oh.
But if you like, I don't. You can't really answer that if you can't remember his other ones. But I would say for Doctor Who lore, it's obviously the captain. But for just general performance, it's Lazarus.
Okay.
And I'm sure we're going to see him again at some point in the future, like in Doctor Who again.
Oh yeah.
Especially since
Russell's coming back.
Exciting stuff.
We're actually going to get good Doctor Who for the first time in 3 years.
Hooray! Misha asks, our thoughts, going from one character to another, what are our thoughts on Francine Jones as a character in comparison to Jackie Tyler? Specifically in terms of their reactions, to their respective daughters travelling with the Doctor and how their opinions on him change.
Oh.
It's a very good question, Misha.
It's a very good question. Have you got an answer?
Would you like some time?
Go first.
Would you like some time to think? Okay, so I've obviously had this question open while we've been recording, so I've had a chance to think about this. So, obviously, Jackie's first introduction to the Doctor was always going to be bad because, of course, she disappeared for a year. came back and the doctor was like, whoops, Butterfingers, my bad. And obviously she slaps him, she hates him, and then she just starts to love him a bit more. She warms to the doctor. And obviously, as much as she was always still a bit like wary of the doctor and what happens, because obviously she knows, she's seen firsthand what can happen when you travel with the doctor. She knew how strong her daughter was in Rose and how strong of a relationship there was between Rose and the doctor. So she had a few more years to really warm to the doctor and see that relationship grow. So how she was by the time the end of series 2 comes around, like, it's almost like justifiable in what she's been through with the doctor. So first, just in the initial comparison, Jackie's had way more time to grow as a character in relationship to the doctor compared to Francine. Francine has that initial uncertainty because it's like, it's your daughter with some random bloke that, as far as they're aware, they just went off after the night before, got a bit busy, and then here he is again. Her, like, her concern about David straight away, I feel is a little bit manufactured, especially when she turns around to Reggie. What's her brother called again?
Does it begin with an L? Leo,
yeah. I just call him Reggie because it's Reggie Yates.
Yeah.
Like when she turns to him and she's like, something's up, I can feel it. It's like, really? Can you really? Okay, sure.
I was
like, you've just met a very confident bloke that your daughter's supposedly banging, and it's like, I get that there will always be that motherly concern, but the idea that there's something bigger going on, I find a bit like weird. And then obviously you get that random bloke who obviously works beneath Harold Saxon, no spoilers in case you don't know, and he obviously gives her more information and obviously doesn't necessarily change her mind but reaffirms her opinion. But I kind of wish it was the fact that he changed her mind, that she was like, oh, hi doctor, a little bit concerned about you because I'm assuming you're knobbing my daughter. But when she hears about the doctor from this bloke, she could have gone one or two ways. Either she could have gone, oh, shut up, who are you, go away. But then also she could have also had her mind changed entirely, and I feel that would have made for a much more interesting character than just being this very bitchy, difficult older woman.
Yeah.
Because I guess as the audience, you're supposed to feel for her and not supposed to love her, but you might feel a bit of a connection to her because she's a companion's mother, in the same way we had it with Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't really put it across that way. There's never been a point so far where we've liked her. Admittedly, so far, all we've seen is the fact that they're a family in jeopardy with Martha's dad going off and banging some bimbo and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like, she's not had the best introduction, but I kind of wish her introduction was done slightly differently. Her opinion of the doctor wasn't already like mega skeptical.
Yeah.
I think she should have been skeptical from a knobbing perspective, for lack of a better phrase, but not so much from a general, I think my daughter's in danger perspective. And I'd like to have seen that bloke fully change her mind, not reaffirm it.
Yeah, I think you've basically just said everything that I was going to say, which is that her first reaction feels a little bit too suspicious. Because, I mean, if your daughter leaves a party, meets a bloke and sort of, you know, he's, as the doctor says, they've been doing stuff. You assume they've gone home, they've had sex, and that's just kind of, she's met a guy, you know, that happens. So I think you would be a bit like, okay, you've met a guy who you've only just found out about and you seem to be really into him all of a sudden. That's a bit weird, but okay, sure. But you wouldn't be, he's weird, I don't like him, he's dangerous, like you said. I think it would have been good for him to change her mind. Like, she sees the danger that they're in, and then he says, is Martha still with the doctor? And she says, yeah, what about him? As if she's on the defensive for her daughter instead of, because yeah, okay, your daughter's met some guy that you don't know who he is or what have you, but you would still be on the defensive of your daughter because it's your daughter. So I feel like she'd have been a bit like, yeah, what about him? Why are you bringing my daughter into this? And then he says what he tells her, and she's like, okay, like, I don't know who you are, but sure. And then
maybe
after he then reaffirms it later, she's like, oh, okay, I see what you mean now. I've been through all this now. Now I can see that she might be in danger. And that's when she leaves the voicemail. Obviously, it still leads to the same conclusion, but it's just a more natural
It would have felt
progression.
a little less manufactured.
Yeah.
Maybe they could have. I mean, it depends on where they could have actually fit this in, but maybe they could. This could have maybe justified Martha's like sudden infatuation with the Doctor. Maybe this is something that's part of her character as a whole, and not just something that's come along with the Doctor. Maybe it could be the case that they could have added in a few more lines for like Tish or Leo. That's like, oh, you know, she's there, she is, getting all googly eyed over every man she meets, and then maybe her mother makes a reference. Like if there's a point when there's just her mum and her talking, like there have been, like where she could have dropped in a bit of history about how it's like, you know, you've always
latched onto people too quickly.
You've been burned too many times before by guys, and you know her siblings saying that she gets she falls in love with people way too quickly. That would maybe justify her opinion of the Doctor so suddenly, and give it a bit more, ground it a bit more, because as far all we see is this girl falling in love with the Doctor so quickly. And
also
it's difficult for us because we've just seen him lose Rose, as someone he genuinely loved.
Yeah.
So it's like they could have used this opportunity to ground that facet of Martha's character a bit more so.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It would have grounded both of their reactions much more, like, sort of purposefully, if she'd have said something like, you always fall for guys too quickly, because then it would have been Martha's character sort of deemed a bit more like prominent, I guess, and we'd have understood it a little bit more to be like, oh, okay, so it's not just the Doctor that she's fallen in love with super quickly. And then obviously it would have given her mum the reason to be a bit more suspicious, which was then built up over the course of the episode from the guy who works for Saxon. So,
but like I said, that could easily be just fully implied, because as I've said in the past when we've talked about this, about Martha's character, we all know someone who is like that, who will just fall in love in half a second flat, because some people are just like that.
But I think it's also more of a testament to how Martha's character ends the series as well, which obviously I won't say anything about, but like, yeah.
We definitely get somewhere, but like now we're watching this series through again, we're certainly picking more holes in the character development between these characters. And again, I think it might have been a bit more difficult because we've gone from a single mother with Rose and her dead dad, who comes back to some extent again over the course of 2 series, to a whole family spat in the space of one. So it's like, it's the Chibnall approach of biting off potentially a little bit more than you can chew. So it's all a bit, but then again, it does kind of come to fruition, like, you know, things are going to go wrong when certain things in a family sense happen towards the end of the series, which we'll get to. So it's like that, it does work in that regard. But again, that's sort of stuff we'll get to. And to sort of wrap things up, Adam has asked, do we think this episode is often overlooked when it comes to some of the worst? You never see it in reviews for being bad. It gave some character development to Martha and her family, but it was pretty much it, in his opinion.
I wouldn't say it was a bad episode. I think it's fine. I think it's just one of those episodes that is take it at face value and kind of move on from face value funny.
Nah.
But I do think it is it's just a top of the iceberg episode. Like, you just get what you need to get from it, and that's it, really. You don't really have much that needs to be done in this episode to build up a wider universe, because the wider universe is being built up over the course of episodes that you wouldn't even notice at this point had you not seen the series before. Like, obviously, we've mentioned the Saxon references a lot as we're going through this series, and that's because obviously it's building to something bigger. But really, I think a lot of the episodes in this series are kind of scratch the surface episodes. Like, you get some character development, and in some of them you get more character development than others, but I think this one was a good point to bring in a bit more of the Doctor is dangerous Harold Saxon trope thing that's going on.
Yeah,
but I do think it's an interesting enough topic that I don't think it should be added in to be one of the worst, because the pacing was good. The story wasn't unbelievable, like, really. I feel like, there could have been small points, like we've discussed, that were done slightly better, but all in all, I don't think it was a totally, like, terrible episode. So, no, I would disagree. I don't think it's overlooked for being a bad episode, because I don't think it's a particularly bad episode.
I agree. I think people just fully latched on to the fact that the CGI on the monster wasn't great and it had a face, which was a bit weird. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a very inoffensive episode. There's a lot, I think, to like about it. It's not one of those episodes that's up there with something like, as the always go-to example, something like Love and Monsters, where there is, I always say this, there is a genuine heart behind Love and Monsters, but there's just certain things that are so, I wouldn't say unapologetically bad, but there are things that people latch onto way, way more. And Lazarus Experiment is not one of those episodes, I don't think. I think it's a perfectly passable Doctor Who romp, and I think going back to it, I mean, I never had an overtly bad opinion of it, but going back to it now again, it's like, do you know what? This really isn't as bad as people say. So basically, if people add it to their list of the worst Doctor Who episodes ever, I think they're being overly dramatic. It's nowhere near as bad as people think it is.
No, I mean, Fear Her was far worse.
Fear Her is terrible. Like, genuinely, after going back and doing Series 2, I genuinely think Fear Her is worse than The Monsters.
I do. I mean, the thing is about bad Doctor Who episodes is that you've got to almost judge them on a different criteria to what you would judge a normal bad episode on. Because a bad episode of Doctor Who doesn't really come down to the monster of the week. It doesn't really come down to the CGI. What it comes down to is the writing and the overarching plot. And I think if you look at this episode from a standpoint of the writing was excellent. Like, really, the conversations that they have and the dialogue that is shared between characters and the points that they bring out within the episode, the dialogue is spot on a lot of the time. Yeah, okay, there's certain lines that could have been a bit better and what have you, but that's the same with anything you watch. Whereas bad episodes, if the writing is terrible, nothing else matters. It could be the most stunning looking episode in the world, but if the dialogue is crap, it's so obvious. Especially, Chibnall's era, you can just see that example through and through, that things have been left on the cutting room floor, that, like, key points have been missed out because he only writes one draft, and it's just, like, it's very apparent when something hasn't been thought through and then just produced, whereas this era of Doctor Who, the last thing you can say about it is that it hasn't been thought through. Really. And I think that's why Fear Her is bad, because the dialogue isn't great. Like, a lot of the conversations that are had within Fear Her are so rushed, and the points are so almost like slap you in the face that you kind of think like, why is this episode here? But this one, I really don't think it's got the structure to be a bad episode, because it's not wonderful, it's not the best, but it's definitely not the worst.
No, absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head with that one. So those were our thoughts on the Lazarus experiment, which, again, if people think it's really, really bad, I wouldn't say they're overtly wrong, but I think it is opinion. But I think if they say it's one of the worst, they are being overly dramatic. And give it another go. If you're listening to this, you're just listening through to this podcast and not like rewatching it with us, go back and watch it again. And genuinely, it's nowhere near as bad as people say or you might remember. Like, it's a perfectly passable episode of Doctor Who, and the more Mark Gatiss we get, the better, quite frankly, because he's a wonderfully talented bloke, and I'm very much excited to see him in Doctor Who again, either as a writer or as an actor, or both, or whatever may come our way once old Russell is back in the throne. Not that he ever left the throne, but he's back in the throne.
Back in the the thick of it.
In the fray of Doctor Who. But yeah, that is about where we'll wrap up things today. So thank you so very much for, again, your patience, and also for listening this afternoon. Or watching if you're on YouTube. If you're not already subscribed to me on YouTube, then why not hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, etc.
Did you actually say that?
Drop a fat dab on the bell so you get notified of videos and so on. And if you're not actually subscribed to me on YouTube and you're currently listening on the old Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, then why not search my name? Why not search Rich Hudson on YouTube? Because there's Doctor Who videos on the way. Yeah. I promise they are being done. I promise. It's just been slow for reasons we have already discussed. Amy, where can they find you on the old social medias?
You can find me at Ames_Elizabeth on Instagram and Twitter, but I don't really use Twitter. So Instagram, probably
You
better.
can find her on Instagram. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PickUpChangeToe. And if you're not following Kasterpod either, at Kasterpod, Kasterpod, on Twitter, then you can do, because you can submit questions for the podcast. That obviously we've had a couple of questions that we've discussed today. So if you would like to be involved at some point in the future, then please do follow us on Twitter. But thank you all very much for listening. 42 is next. Chris Chibnall's first foray into modern Doctor Who.
Good eye.
Let's see how this stacks up compared to what he's been doing over the last couple of years. But that will be next time. And we hopefully will see you then. So thank you all very much for listening once again. Take care of yourselves. Have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you next time. See ya.
Bye.